He always had a phrase ready, something sharp, something final. But the more he spoke, the less anyone saw him. And one day, the words stopped working, even for himself. I used to think staying silent made you look weak, that if you didn't speak, people would assume you had nothing to say. So I filled every pause with words, not truth, just noise, approval chasing, ego protecting, noise. And for a while, it worked. People nodded. They laughed at the right time. They called me confident. What they really meant was, "You talk fast enough to hide your fear." There's this look people give you when you talk like that. It's not respect, it's not connection, it's polite distance. They hear the performance, but they never hear you. I've been around long enough to tell you this. The moment someone starts throwing certain phrases around, it's like watching a mask slide over their face. Their eyes disappear. Their presence vanishes. All you're left with is a reflex, something rehearsed, automatic, hollow. You're just jealous. I already knew that. Whatever, I don't care. That's just how I am. I'm not like other people. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. I always speak the truth. Deal with it. Each of those sounds tough, but behind every one is the same fear. Please don't see how lost I am. I remember the exact day I realized how foolish I sounded. I was in a conversation, no, an argument, and I said, with full chest and fake pride, "I don't need anyone." The silence that followed wasn't victory. It was exposure. I had finally said something so obviously false that even I couldn't pretend it was power. It was loneliness, weaponized. Real fools don't lack knowledge. They reject reflection. They're allergic to being wrong, terrified of being questioned, and addicted to being seen as sharp. So they repeat the same tired lines they think make them look untouchable. All they do is reveal their fear of being touched. No one is born wise, but some people are so desperate to look wise that they never get there. Want to know who's dangerous? Not the one who's quiet, the one who's loud without purpose, the one who uses words like armor, who throws phrases around like they're facts when they're really just masks. You can't trust someone who needs to win every sentence. You know what's harder than pretending to be right all the time? Admitting that you don't know everything and still showing up with your dignity intact. That's the moment people actually start to listen. The loudest people in the room aren't leaders. They're echoes. They repeat what they've heard, hoping no one notices that they've never lived it. I say this not as someone who watched from the sidelines, but as someone who played the fool over and over until I couldn't stand the sound of my own voice anymore. And when the silence finally came, it didn't feel empty. It felt honest. Words are tools, but in the hands of fear, they become weapons. Used to push people away, used to protect a version of ourselves that never truly existed. You think that was bad? There's one phrase, just one, that sounds polite, sounds harmless, even sounds kind. But it kills trust the moment you say it. And almost every adult I know has said it without realizing the damage. You'll hear it in the next part. And when you do, you might remember the last time you said it and what it cost you. There's one sentence that used to come out of my mouth automatically. I thought it made me look strong, thought it showed I wasn't a burden, that I had everything under control. People would ask how I was, and I'd smile, calm, collected, rehearsed, and say, "I'm fine." It's a phrase that slips out easier than breath. You say it when your world is falling apart, when you're swallowing your pride, your rage, your shame. You say it so no one asks more questions, so they don't see how close you are to breaking. But here's the truth. I'm fine is the most socially accepted way to lie to yourself and everyone around you. It's not courage, it's fear in a nice suit. And the worst part? People believe it because they want to. No one wants your pain to interrupt their comfort. So they nod, say good, and walk away relieved. You just made their day easier and yours lonelier. For years, I answered every "How are you?" with fine, even when I wasn't sleeping, even when I was falling apart behind closed doors, even when the woman I loved looked at me like I wasn't really there anymore. I thought silence made me dignified. It didn't. It made me disappear. There's a strange kind of foolishness in pretending to be invincible. You wear it like armor, but it starts to rust from the inside. The more you say, "I'm fine," the less people see the real you. And one day they stop asking, not because they don't care, but because you trained them not to. This phrase, this tiny, harmless phrase, is the reason so many relationships rot quietly. Why so many people lie next to someone at night and feel completely alone. It's not the fights that break us. It's the pretending that nothing's wrong. You want to see the difference between a fool and a wise person? Ask them how they're doing. The fool will answer too quickly. The wise one will pause. Maybe they'll say, "I don't know." Maybe they'll say, "It's been hard." That's not weakness. That's courage. I had a friend once, a brilliant man, the kind who always had the right words. But when I asked how he was, he said, "Fine," one too many times. And then he was gone. Not from the country, from life. And all of us who stayed behind kept asking the same question. Why didn't he say something? He did. We just weren't listening, because he said it the way we're all taught to, quietly, with a smile, and a word that killed the conversation. Fine. The older I get, the more allergic I am to fake peace. I'd rather sit in a room with someone who tells me I'm a mess than nod along with someone who's totally fine. Honesty builds bridges. Pretending builds walls. And here's something no one tells you when you're younger. The world doesn't reward people for hiding. It forgets them. Loud liars get attention. Quiet truth-tellers get forgotten, until the day their silence makes noise too loud to ignore. There's a phrase coming next that sounds wise at first, like something a mentor or parent might say. But it poisons trust. And the worst part? People say it when they're trying to prove they're better than you. You'll hear it in part 3. And once you recognize it, you'll never fall for the performance again. Have you said any of these phrases too? Then maybe this story found you for a reason. If even one part of it touched something real inside you, subscribe. We speak here about the things most people are afraid to even think. And in the comments, tell me, which of these phrases have you said? Not to argue, but to be honest. Some people think sounding calm means they're in control. They speak slowly, smile condescendingly, lower their voice, as if volume equals wisdom. But listen closely to what they're saying. That's where the real message hides. One phrase, 7 words, always delivered with this thin layer of superiority. You've heard it, maybe said it yourself. I already knew that. That phrase is a mask. It's what people say when their ego can't handle being the last to know something. It's not about knowledge. It's about control. A performance that says, "You didn't surprise me. You didn't teach me anything. I'm still above you." The first time I caught myself saying it, I was in my early 30s. Someone gave me advice I actually needed. It was thoughtful, it was true, and it stung. So instead of thanking them, I shrugged and said, I already knew that. They went quiet, and in that silence I realized I'd just built a wall between us, for no reason other than pride. I didn't already know. I just didn't want to admit I didn't. There's something deeply foolish in being allergic to learning. I've met people with decades of experience and zero growth. Why? Because every time life tried to teach them something new, they responded with, I know. I've heard it. That's nothing new. You can't fill a full glass, especially when it's full of self-satisfaction. You know who says, I already knew that? People who are secretly terrified that they're behind. People who think admitting ignorance is the same as admitting defeat. People who confuse knowing with being. You might know something and still not live it. You might have heard the truth and still not own it. Wisdom isn't about collecting facts. It's about letting those facts change how you move in the world. I once watched a father say it to his son. The boy, barely 15, was trying to explain how hurt he felt, and the father cut him off with a cold, "Yeah, I already knew that." The kid shut down instantly. I saw it. The way his shoulders dropped, his eyes went flat. That one sentence told him, "Your truth doesn't matter. I'm above this. You're not teaching me anything." And that boy? He stopped talking. Not just that day, that year. Arrogance doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. It sounds gentle, but it strangles connection. It looks composed, but it repels closeness. And worst of all, it's contagious. One person fakes superiority and others follow, because no one wants to be the first to say, "I didn't know that." I've unlearned more in the last 10 years than I learned in the 20 before that. The real shift happened when I stopped pretending I already had the answers. You don't grow by knowing. You grow by listening. And you know what else? When someone shares something with you, an insight, a truth, even just a feeling, and you rush to say, "I already knew that," what you're actually doing is dismissing the risk they just took to be honest with you. People don't need you to be smarter. They need you to be real. And being real means sometimes you hear something you've heard before, but you treat it like it matters anyway. Because it does. There's nothing impressive about being unteachable, and there's nothing shameful about learning late. Let me know when you're ready for part 4. The shift begins there. The next phrase sounds almost empowering, but it's the perfect disguise for emotional cowardice. Strength isn't loud. Real strength doesn't need announcements, warnings, or slogans. But there's one phrase people love to throw around, and every time I hear it, I know exactly what I'm dealing with. Someone who wants to look fearless, but has no idea how to actually feel pain and stay open. That's just how I am. At first glance, it sounds confident, like a boundary, like self-awareness. But dig deeper, and you'll see it for what it really is: a locked door, a defense, a refusal to evolve. I've heard it come out of mouths after cruelty, after neglect, after betrayal. Someone does damage, gets called out, and instead of owning the mess, they shrug and say it. That's just how I am. Translation: I don't want to change. I'd rather protect my patterns than face myself. I said it too, many times, usually when someone got too close, when their expectations scared me, when I felt cornered, and the only way to stay in control was to slam down a phrase that would end the conversation. But here's what I finally had to face. That's just how I am is not identity. It's avoidance. It's the phrase of someone who's too afraid to look in the mirror, who's afraid that if they dig too deep, they'll find nothing underneath the bravado. It's easier to pretend your flaws are permanent than admit they're choices. Choices you keep making every single day. You know who clings to that sentence the hardest? The people whose behavior has cost them the most. Love, connection, trust. It's like watching someone burn a bridge, then stand on the ashes and say, "Well, it is what it is." No, it isn't. It's what you chose. There's no growth without discomfort. There's no self-respect without self-confrontation. And there's no wisdom in treating your worst habits like unchangeable facts. One day, a woman I cared about looked me in the eye and said, "You hurt people and then hide behind that sentence like it makes you honest." That was the moment I stopped feeling proud of my consistency. Being consistent isn't noble if what you're consistently doing is damage. "That's just how I am" is a phrase that says, don't expect anything from me. Don't hold me accountable. Let me stay small. I've sat with men who lost their families over that sentence, who said it during every fight, every chance to grow, every plea to show up differently. And when the people they loved finally left, they sat in the silence and whispered it again, not because they believed it, but because it was all they had left. They repeated it until it felt like a shield, but it didn't protect them. It isolated them. You know what's truly strong? Saying, "I used to be that way, but I'm working on it." Saying, "I'm not proud of that part of me." Saying, "I can do better." Those aren't weaknesses. They're declarations of growth, of maturity, of being someone other people can actually trust. The moment you stop defending your flaws and start understanding them, that's when change begins. That's when your words start sounding different, softer, truer. That's when people lean in instead of stepping back. A fool treats patterns like destiny. A wise person treats patterns like choices. And the truth is, "That's just how I am" is the easiest way to stay stuck. Let me know when you're ready for part 5. It goes even deeper. The next phrase people love to say is all about control, and it poisons every relationship it touches. There's a kind of control that doesn't shout. It doesn't threaten or argue. It just throws one phrase like a grenade, then steps back and watches you clean up the emotional mess. You've heard it. Maybe you've even said it without realizing what it really meant. "If you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best." On the surface, it sounds like self-respect, like standards, like someone who refuses to be mistreated. But if you really pay attention, you'll see the manipulation underneath. What this phrase often says, without saying it, is this: "I'm allowed to be careless with you, and you're supposed to be grateful when I'm not." I used to admire people who said that, thought they were tough, untouchable, honest. But now, when I hear it, I see immaturity dressed up as empowerment. I see someone building a relationship on terms that only serve them, not both people. Because the truth is, your worst isn't supposed to be someone else's emotional prison. When you love someone, you don't test them by becoming unbearable. You don't make them earn your affection by surviving your damage. You don't hand them your worst and say, "This is the price of admission." Real relationships aren't based on endurance. They're based on accountability. I once said that line to someone I cared about. We were in the middle of a rough season. I was shutting down, withdrawing, pushing her away, and instead of apologizing, I tossed that phrase like a challenge. "If you can't handle me at my worst." She looked at me, tired, quiet, and said, "I've been handling your worst for a long time. The real question is, Do you ever plan to handle mine? That sentence cracked something in me, because I hadn't. I'd made the whole connection about how much pain I was in, how much grace I deserved. I never once asked what it was costing her to keep showing up. There's a foolish kind of pride in expecting love to survive our neglect. The idea that someone should prove their loyalty by enduring the ugliest parts of us, without explanation, without growth, without change, is not strength. It's entitlement. And yet, people say this phrase like it's scripture. They post it in captions. They write it in dating profiles. They wear it like a badge of depth. But all it really says is, I want someone to love me without me doing the work of being lovable. Listen, we all have flaws. We all break. But if your worst is constant and your best is a rare performance, you're not in a relationship. You're in a hostage situation. I've sat across from couples who threw this phrase at each other like weapons, each one waiting for the other to break, then calling it weakness when they finally walked away. That's not love. That's emotional blackmail with a pretty quote on top. You want to be loved at your worst? Fine. But first ask yourself, do you know what your worst really looks like? Have you faced it, taken responsibility for it, worked to soften it, or do you just expect people to absorb it? True connection isn't about surviving each other. It's about building something you both want to stay inside of, even on the hard days. And maybe that's why this phrase bothers me so much now, because it celebrates the exact opposite of love. The idea that endurance is the same as devotion, that love is a test, and whoever suffers the most wins. No, real love isn't proven in how much you tolerate. It's shown in how much you're willing to change so the people who care about you don't have to suffer unnecessarily. And if someone ever tells you, if you can't handle me at my worst, you might want to ask, and what exactly are you doing to make sure your worst isn't what I always get? Let me know when you're ready for part 6, the closing chapter. It's not a summary, it's something quieter, a truth you only hear after you've stopped pretending. There was one phrase I held on to longer than any of the others, longer than I'm fine, longer than that's just how I am, longer than I already knew that. It followed me like a shadow, into arguments, into heartbreak, into silence I thought I chose. I don't care. It's the easiest sentence to say when your heart is exhausted, when you've been disappointed enough times that you start calling numbness maturity. It sounds detached, powerful even, a clean break. But don't let the simplicity fool you. It's the most dishonest line of them all. People say, I don't care when they care too much, and don't know what to do with it. I've said it to people I loved. I've said it to myself in the mirror. I've said it to life itself during the worst years, when hope felt like a scam and connection felt like a trick. I'd walk away from things that mattered and mutter under my breath, whatever, I don't care. And it worked. For a while. People believed me. Even I believed me. Until the nights got quiet and I realized every I don't care was a wound I didn't want to look at. There's nothing noble in pretending nothing touches you. It doesn't make you wise, it makes you cold. And coldness is not the same as strength. It's grief with no name. The hardest part of growing up wasn't learning how to let go. It was learning how to admit what I actually wanted, who I actually missed, what actually broke me. Because once you admit you care, you risk something again. You open the door to pain. And fools, real fools, think pain is the enemy. It's not. A life without pain is a life without meaning. You don't need to broadcast your feelings to everyone. You don't need to cry on cue. But if you spend your whole life pretending you don't care about people, about yourself, about this moment, you'll wake up one day surrounded by nothing but space. No warmth, no weight, no pulse. I lost someone once, not to death, but to distance. I told them I didn't care, said it straight to their face, watched them walk out of my life like they'd been waiting for that sentence. They never came back, and they shouldn't have. The older I got, the more I realized. The person who says, I don't care too easily, is usually the one no one runs to when it matters. Because care, real care, is what people feel when they're safe with you. And if all you ever show is indifference, don't be surprised when life treats you the same. Now, I care. Deeply, quietly, relentlessly. I just don't perform it anymore. I don't need to prove I'm above feeling. I don't need to pretend I'm too wise to hurt. I've made peace with the fact that care is not weakness. It's what separates the living from the disconnected. You asked which phrases reveal a fool? I'll tell you. It's not just about what they say. It's how often they use words to run. From truth, from vulnerability, from growth. A fool thinks talking louder hides the cracks. But those of us who've lived long enough, we don't listen to volume anymore. We listen to what's missing. And when I hear someone say, I don't care, I know exactly what's missing. Them. I used to think I needed to sound right, to speak like a man who'd figured it all out. But now I know the ones who say the least feel the most. And the ones who drop loud phrases like armor, they're not strong. They're just afraid. So if you've said any of these 7 phrases, welcome to the club. We all have. But maybe today's the first time you finally heard yourself